Here we go. So this is part two of our Smarter AI Marketing series. If you missed part one, do not worry at all. I'm sure you have the links or you will have them after this. But if you're missing it, we will give you the link to just go to that page. Maybe Adam, if you could drop that into the chat, the website page that has those, just in case, because the recording's there. Do not feel for a moment that you are going to be confused today because you weren't at the first session. You can catch up anytime, but each session stands alone. And yet together they're going to help you use AI in your marketing better. So session one was content creation, mostly because for you as accountants, that's kind of where your mind tends to go when it comes to AI. You're thinking, okay, how do I use AI for my marketing? I write blogs, I write website content, I write emails. So we covered that aspect. Today, really excited about this one because this is when you start thinking, how could I use AI to research potential audiences? Do I need to have an industry niche? What if I had this industry niche? Or I don't have an industry niche, but what is the topic or area or challenge that my ideal client has? And what do I need to do with it for my marketing? There's also competitor research, which we will be talking about today. Um, and there's a lot that you can research about what other accountants are doing. And I will just give you a little spoiler alert. Even in the prep I was doing for this session, it was fascinating to me what happened when I said, what other accounting firms are working with this kind of industry? And if your website and your marketing and your information is not enough to help Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, all of these AI tools to find you and recommend them to prospects, that is an opportunity for you because it is phenomenal the amount of information these AI tools are like, oh, here's this firm. They have a YouTube channel. They have a PDF guide. The PDF guide covers this. They just give all this stuff. And if you're just, hey, I have a page that says we work with business owners, then this is your opportunity to do a little more research. I will also caveat this by saying a lot of what we're going through today is what we do at PF, what our strategists do when we are creating a strategy for you. So if you get to the point during this session and go, oh my word, this is a lot of work, not to worry. That is what we are there for. We do a lot of work. But if you want to play with it and begin digging into it, we've got some specifics for you. So, for those of you who haven't met me or don't know me yet, I'm the owner and founder of PF. We started in 2012, so we've now been going for 15 years working exclusively with accountants and bookkeepers. I am a CPA in the States, qualified accountant. Many of you have a copy of The Accountant Marketer. My second book, Accountants You Are Creative, as you are, is coming out in April. I am literally in Edinburgh recording the audiobook tomorrow and Friday, so it's very exciting. And I am the founder of the Accelerator Coaching Group, which I have just updated this morning because we have one of the biggest accelerator groups that we've ever had, and we try to cap those at 30, and we are at 24. So if any of you were thinking of joining the accelerator, 6 of you may have the remaining slots if you wish them. And I believe that the reason for that is that this time the accelerators, which have been running for 10 years and have had 553 accountants go through it, is now having an AI focus. So it's a great follow on to what we're talking about today. But let's get to the good stuff on why you're here. So we are going to look at how you use AI tools to research industries. So a niche or specifically an industry like veterinarians or creative agencies, etc. To research competitors, other accountancy firms who are doing either what you want to do, what you are doing, or what you're considering doing. And your clients. I do want to use this opportunity to say, let's not just sit there with AI. Let's ask the humans that we're actually working with and see what they say as well. And I will briefly touch on analytics, but that is the topic of our third masterclass, which is in early February, on how do you know that AI is actually helping your marketing in the first place. If there is anything you want to ask throughout this, please use the chat box. And for those of you who have appeared since, feel free to drop in where you are joining us from in the world, either city or state, if you're in America or Canada, or city or region in the UK, or wherever you are. It would be lovely to hear where you're all joining from. And my first question for the chat box is, what is the client research or competitor research that you're curious about? Do you have a niche you want to research? If so, put in there. Say, I want to know more about hairdressers or vets, or I just want to know who my competitors are, or whatever. Basically, what is it that you want to learn about in terms of this kind of research? I've got lots to share, but I do want to make sure it applies to you guys specifically. So drop that into the chat, and also feel free to say where you're joining from. Okay, so we have opera singers. Love that one. Remember that, Louise. Keynote speakers. Very fascinating, Hillary. Lots of research, I think, that we could do with that. And pricing trends. So, Gina, just a little more information on that if you want to type that in. Do you mean price, like competitor pricing? Like, what are other accountants charging for this niche or this type of work? Wellness centers and body workers. What prospects actually respond to? It's a great question, Darren. We'll definitely be talking about that. Adam wants to learn more about accountants, so he's in the right place. Adam works for PF, in case you guys are wondering. And how do I promote knowledge of a particular program? Creators, this is great. Loads of good things here, and loads of good research that you want to do. My second follow-up question is, if you were to research this thing you've just typed in here, you want to learn about wellness centers or keynote speakers, is there an AI tool that you would default to do that? And if you don't know, just say, I don't know, that's why I'm here. But if you're like, well, I was thinking of using this, drop the name of the tool in there. GPT, of course, often is where all of us start with just about anything, which is totally fair. Gemini, spoiler alert, we will absolutely be looking at Gemini. Adam's got a soft spot for Gemini. Claude, okay, yep, Claude is another one. Any other particular apps that you would start with if you're doing research? Just curious which ones you guys are doing, and if you haven't been and that's why you're here, that's what we'll cover. Okay, so this is a very brief summary. This is not the full and final, but it is an indicator of the kind of tools you can use for the different kinds of things. So, and Adam, who's our analytics strategist, he and I have been working on a lot of this. So if there's anything that I end up saying, Adam, that you want to add to or even slightly correct, feel free. But the route that we were both talking about is, if you want to get actual like research information, and that's what I mean, this insight, Gemini, Notebook LM, Perplexity. Those are the top ones for like, I want more information about hairdressers, about wellness businesses, about creators. I want to know what this kind of prospect is looking for in terms of assets. I put connection for ChatGPT, Claude, and also Gemini, but mostly ChatGPT and Claude, because oftentimes what happens is you can gather information from these and then put it into ChatGPT and say, can you just get to the point of whether this works for me? Here's my brand. Here's my firm. Here's all this data. And I'm going to show you some of the kind of test research I've done in prep for this session. And I played with that a little. I did some research on Gemini, and it gave me all this data and all this information, and here's these things. And it went straight to the research. Whereas ChatGPT, remember, ChatGPT's job is like a cheerleader. You are the single best accountant who has ever considered a potential niche. This is fantastic. You're going to do great. Like, that's kind of its goal there. So one of the things about Gemini Notebook LM, although I did find it funny that Gemini also told me it was a fantastic idea within about zero point zero 0.02 seconds. But a lot of them focus on the data, and then ChatGPT and Claude are a little more for like, okay, let's gather this because a lot of you have been using ChatGPT, so it does know you and your firm and your brand and your audience and your revenues and your, any of those things, and it's able to connect them and can maybe make it a little more human. So I'm going to focus on both of those, but I did also want to mention that once we've done the research and we move into the strategy and then the tactics, so the research is first to say, is this even viable? The strategy connects it back to your firm and is this best for you? And then the tactics are, what are the actual tasks that we do? What's the detail? So things like Uber Suggest and Google Trends for keywords or things people are typing in, or what are wellness centers asking about? What kind of assets, somebody was asking this, what kind of assets are wellness owners of wellness centers downloading? And that kind of information we can get really granular. But remember, with all of this research, so far, my experience with any of these AI tools is that they are always trying to hurry you to the next step. So no matter what research you ask it for, you say, can you tell me how many, whoops, let me go back. How many wellness centers are in, let me go back. Wellness centers stuck with me. Morgan, remind me where you are, like geographically, where is you guys' firm? Because this is also important when you're doing research. You don't just necessarily, presumably, want wellness centers in the entire world. So how many wellness centers are there in this area? And it's going to give you that and then be like, do you want me to create a PDF guide for you? And you're like, hold on. Like, we haven't even gotten to the next step first. So, my first specific tip for you is keep pushing it to ask you questions and to help determine if this is the best one for you, or even if this is a viable one, maybe not even the best one, but is this even viable for you? And and don't let it distract you. Like, its single goal is to move you to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I saw a hilarious reel where they had somebody leaving an office and they were like, this is Chat GPT when you're trying to like stop the conversation. And the guy's like, hey, I'm leaving for the day. And the Chat GPT guy was like, okay, it was great to have you in here today. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Where are you going for dinner? And the guy's like, I just like, honestly, I need to get to the lift and I need to go. And it just kept offering and offering more things until it slammed the lift door in his face. So the point is, when you're doing this research, insist on pushing it to keep researching, keep going, keep getting deeper, because otherwise it will rush you to, would you like to create a PDF guide? And you haven't even got to that point yet. Okay, so let's look at industries. I'm going to look at that in particular. You can do this in a lot of different ways, but we've got creators, we've got wellness centers, we've got keynote speakers, opera singers. So when you have an industry, and for my example one, I used veterinary practices in Arizona. That's actually a live and very real example from one of our clients who is considering it. And we are working on a whole strategy with them. But I thought, well, that'd be a interesting one to throw into Gemini. So I started with Gemini and literally just said, I want to do research on these veterinary businesses. And I always tell Gemini or Claude or GPT or any of these who I am working with, because otherwise it'll say, oh, PF is looking for veterinary businesses. That's a little diversion from accountants, but that's super cool. So you may not have to do that, but that's always what I do. And you may want to do that if you haven't used it very much and say, I am an accounting firm who, etc. So what I started with is just a very simple question of how many vet businesses are there that would be able to afford the fees. And then we're saying, well, the ideal average business client is spending 1,000 per month and then doing higher fees. So I'm giving it a little bit of information. Now, you'll notice Gemini was like, fantastic. What a wonderful idea. This is the best idea ever. Fortunately, it's saying it's fantastic niche to explore. So it's not telling me to go ahead tomorrow, which is good. So the first thing that we see with Gemini is it is very good at getting market data. I love that it's like market data for 2026. We are all of 21 days old, and they're like, here is your most recent market data. So you might want to question that and say, where did you get that? And is it 2026 or is it 2025? But they're giving us how many veterinary entities? How much do they generate? What are the potential target clients? And here's the question, and this is because I told it to do this, so make sure you do this. Can you ask me questions about this? That is the number one thing you need to tell AI. Otherwise, it will just push you and push you to the next thing. So I asked it to ask me questions. So it first said, okay, well, do you want corporate versus independent ownership? How many full-time veterinarians are there? Do you want these large animal or mobile vets? And it asked these, I didn't even know to ask these things. I don't know a great deal about them. But here you go, straight away. Do you want me to give you a targeted list? Like, I've literally asked you one question. You've given me a sure, yeah, let's get that targeted list and let's get them an email. That I'm being very sarcastic there. This is why you have to push back. And I always say, I'm going to come back to this, but in the meantime, could we look at this? So then I moved to competitors. What are the other accounting firms, specifically in this city, but also some of these other cities? Now, this is the thing I was telling you about. This is utterly fascinating because already we have 5 firms by location that says these are the assets that they provide. So this is already like, hopefully, like a bright light to you to say, if I want to go after either a particular industry or a type of client, and I do not have a unique asset for that industry, then there are other people who are doing it. Now, this isn't to make you despair. This is not to be like, oh my God, I'm never going to get into this because they have a veterinary bookstore and guides and they have all this. You know, one of the things we do in our research is we look at every single one of those and we download stuff and we check to see, does this just sound good or is it an actual useful guide? I've seen some accountancy firms that have tons of resources, and I put that in quotes. And then when you look at it, it's like the world's most generic ebook that wouldn't help anybody, and they've happened to throw the word vet or opera singer or whatever in there. So, again, take this with a grain of salt. You don't look at this and go, oh my gosh, everybody's doing it. I guess I better not. It could be that it seems like they have this helpful resource, but there's more you could do. Or it could give you an indication of the kind of assets that you could consider, or is there anything that's missing? Again, that could be a follow-up question. You could say, this looks like a lot. Are there any assets or are there any issues that you see veterinarians facing that are not covered by these kinds of assets? And then it might come back and say, well, actually, the top 3 issues that they seem to be facing are this, and then question that. Where did you get that from? What research is that based on? Where did you find that? Because you've got the audience and then you've got the issues they face, and then ideally you have some kind of an asset, a guide, a video, a scorecard. I mean, this firm has visual dashboards and KPI walkthroughs. If that is legit, that's pretty specific and that's pretty ideally pretty helpful. This is another section that Gemini went straight to. This is what vets are downloading. Based on my research, this is what they're downloading. I love this one. Vets are obsessed with how they compare to the national average. That's fascinating information. And again, you can get this from Gemini. You can get this from Perplexity. Notebook LM is another one. I did some research on a firm we've worked with in Texas who was considering hair salons. And we used Notebook LM and got tons of stuff, audio overview, blog post, a little like basically a little podcast of all the issues that hair salons face. And we got all of this information. It was very heavy duty. And then what I did is I dropped that into ChatGPT. Because once you start looking at all this, you got a mind map and flashcards and an infographic, and you're going, oh my gosh, this is so much information. And I haven't even done deep research yet, people. This is like just regular research. So if you click deep research, it goes even deeper and takes longer. So what I did is took all of that information, the podcast information, the blog post that it wrote, a research report that it gave me, and then I uploaded the brand book for this accountancy firm. And they're a client of ours, or they were a client when we were working on their brand. So I had that available. So then I'm saying, okay, we've run this research. We're looking at this. This is the report. Can you, act as, this is another one, I've mentioned this one before, tell GPT or tell the AI what to act as. You can tell it to act as a marketing strategist researcher. You can tell it to act as a social media expert. You can tell it to act as a expert marketing strategist to ask you questions. Ask questions so we can determine if this is truly a good market. And that's what we're doing. We do some research in Gemini, and there's loads more, by the way. I just kept going and going in Gemini and in Notebook LM. And then I took that and said, now I want GPT, who knows me, or in this case, my client, and ask questions to determine if this is a good market for this firm. And that is a great question to ask because, as I said, GPT and many of these AI tools are seeking to approve everything you do. So you want to turn it around and be like, why might it be a bad route for me to go? Why might this take a long time? Why might this not work? What are all the reasons that they might delay? It might take a long time. See if you can get some research on average, do you know how long it takes them to sign up to work with an accountancy firm or just switch accountancy firm? It's always worth asking. They might not have the data. I did some research on the length, on the buyers of accountancy firm services and how long they tend to stay with their accountancy firm. And there was a lot of data. I had to gather and gather and gather and then drop it into GPT and try to get a summary. But ultimately, it said it looked like it was 7 to 9 years. So around 8 years, which is a big drop from 5 or 10 years ago when it was closer to 15 to 19 years. People are changing accountants a little more often. They're less worried to do that. A big part of that was from COVID when a bunch of accountants just went offline and just didn't even respond. And people are realizing they don't have to stay with the same accountant forever. So that kind of research you could do for, the hairdressers or for the opera singers or wellness centers or whatever, and say, is there any research on how long it takes them to buy? And there was loads of research about referrals and whether they were coming from referral and then where they were going. So what was really interesting, back to GPT, is that once it reviewed all of this, it started asking the questions of whether this niche fits this brand and said, well, here's where the fit is strong. Here's where the tension starts to appear. So Vila is very high end. There are some salon owners that won't be a fit. So which salon owners? And this is a great question no matter what you're looking at. So like Morgan, for wellness centers, med spas, yoga studios, that could be a really good industry, but also it's good to ask, like, what kind of person within that industry? What kind of issues would they have? Are they able to afford our fees? So again, this is where you upload if you have a brand book, you put that up because that would summarize your mission, your vision, your audience, your brand voice, all of that. If you don't, upload everything that you do have. And one of the best ways, if you're missing some of those, if you got some gaps, talk to PF, join the accelerator coaching group to figure out those gaps and start filling them. Because the last thing you want to do is do all this research and it says, oh, this is super great. And then you compare it to your firm and it isn't a fit. So ultimately, they came back with questions. And what we would probably do is do a lot of this research and then go back to our client and ask them these questions and help them to go back and forth. So, whether you're an existing PF client or not, you could go to this point and go, I've answered all of these questions, and now I just want a little more help to move this to the next level. I thought it was really interesting that I asked GPT to act as a strategist and said, my take is this is not a clear yes or no, which is a classic marketing strategist answer. We often say, well, it depends. It depends. There's a lot of things it depends on, which is good because you really don't want one of these AI tools to come back and give you a decision. You want it to give you information, and then you feed that into these things and start getting a summary. Okay, I know there's a ton of information. We're already halfway through our session. So questions on that, type it into the chat box, and I'm just going to quickly catch up with some of the things that people are putting in here. A couple of people using Perplexity. Rosie, you were mentioning good for sources. I presume you mean like, this is what it is and go here and you can find that. So that's a really helpful thing. And I saw that one in Gemini as well. Um, Hillary's asking about when I created my website, I avoided making it wordy, which we've always recommended too, because core website pages work differently than blog posts or PDF guides or YouTube videos or whatever. And now you're thinking, oh, do I need to add a lot more words? So my short answer would be everyone needs to have lots of words in the right place on your website. So if it's your home page, if it's your about page, if it's your pricing page, you're going to have a header and some information, and then you're going to send them on to the wordy bit. And that's usually a blog post, a PDF guide, a video, could even be a FAQs page with tons and tons of FAQs. The problem is not to have more words, it's to put them in the right place. And the great thing is, as long as it's online somewhere, publicly available, the AI tools will find it. And Adam and I were actually talking about this. We have a client who has this fantastic onboarding guide, super detailed. It's about 40 pages long, and it's for his niche industry. And he's also got one that's like a non-niche, like just your general business owner who's not in that specific industry niche. And we were talking about making sure that was uploaded to his website as a file, because even if you're not having gatekeeping it, having people fill in an email, it's there. And the AI tools, like we saw here, can go, oh, these are the resources that these firms have, and this is what they're, where did it go? There's so much information. These are the resources. This is what it's called. This is what it works, and this is what's using it. Does that help, Hillary? Adam, did you have anything to add about the content, where to put it there? Or is that pretty much?
No, I think that's a good summary. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Put your detail in there. And if
Mm.
you're not sure, just ask. Uh,
Always.
and, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, saying always a detail.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew's asking Notebook LM, giving it deep research and gives you sources. So what I found with Notebook LM is I just gave it a little summary, very similar to what I did here of saying, this is the kind of firm, this is what we're looking at. And I would say, I want you to give me a detailed researched guide. And then it asked me if I wanted a video overview, an audio overview, reports, a slide deck, a data table. Like it, that's partly why Notebook LM is really powerful for research, because it will ask you if you want all this stuff. Of course, it will be dependent on what it finds, but it's going to give you a ton, which is why I recommend then going into GPT or Claude. I would lean towards GPT for like a catch-all AI summary. What does this mean? And Claude tends to be good for writing and creating content. A lot of our clients use it for that. So hopefully that helps. Let me know, Andrew, if you had another question. Louise, you were saying you haven't used Notebook LM for research, so I would give that a try. I would go in there and just say, okay, I want to dig into opera singers in the UK. I want to understand how many of them there are. I want to understand how much they look for and what they're putting in. Again, we may be getting into a little bit of like Uber Suggest and Google Trends. Adam and I were talking about like what words are opera singers typing in, or people who work for opera singers, or is there any connecting niche or type of person, and what words are they typing in and what assets are they downloading, and those kinds of things. So I would start with that. And if it feels overwhelming, which I'm going to say when I did this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much. I found it useful to just have a conversation in GPT about it. Okay, good questions. If you have more, keep them coming. And I am going to move on to competitors, which a couple of you have mentioned specifically in relation to pricing. Now, I would say a very similar thing applies here. If you're going to do competitor research and pricing research, still probably default to Gemini or Notebook LM, Perplexity for things like that. Not that you cannot use this, Gemini especially, and Adam and I are saying because it's connected to Google. I mean, that does sort of make sense to us that it would be connected to that and have a lot of that information. And literally just say, I am this kind of a firm. Again, upload your brand book, your anything you feel comfortable with. If you have the paid business plan with GPT, you don't have to worry about uploading your numbers. You can just put that right up in there. It's not going to use that for answers. And just say, here's everything about my firm. And I want to understand what other firms are working with these kinds of people and what kind of pricing they have. This is another argument for making sure that you have pricing information on your website. It is one of the number one things that when I'm doing website reviews, and as a side quest, if you want your website reviewed by PF, we'll do a 5 to 8 minute Loom video and point out some things that you could improve. Adam, maybe you could find that website review page on our site. It's just wearepf.com/website hyphen review, something like that. And you can request a review. And the number one thing that I tell people is be very specific about who you deal with and make sure you include pricing. Doesn't mean you have to include the prices, but you do have to say this is how we approach pricing because that is what people are asking the AI tools. You guys are asking because you want to know how you compare. I guarantee you your prospects are asking. Because first, it's sort of an awkward question sometimes. And secondly, so many businesses avoid the question until they can have this long, convoluted call when really the person's like, I know, but is it $50 or $500 or $50,000? That's kind of what I want to understand first. So, as you do this research, I would go the same kind of route. I would go into Gemini or your chosen research tool and say, I am this kind of a firm. I work with these kinds of people. I do these kinds of services. And I'm curious what other accountancy firms in this area, make sure to include geography and say, I want to focus just on Atlanta, or I want to focus on actually all businesses of this kind in the Midwest or in the States or nationally or globally, whatever it is that you're working. And I'm looking for any pricing information, even ranges from accountancy firms who work with this, and just see what kinds of things it brings out. Um, I, I'm very curious how that will go because, as I said, there are so many firms that even when they have a pricing page are so vague that basically you need to call us to get a price. And it's definitely becoming more of a trend for people to do as much their own buyer research using AI so that if they have any indication that your prices start at 2000 and they were hoping it was 200, then they won't get in touch. And if that information is wrong somehow, and you're not clearly putting that in your website and in your marketing, you could be missing out on it. Um, so I would follow that same kind of process that we said there is just dig into those areas. You can either ask about the competitors and the assets that they provide. You can ask about the pricing that they provide. And then, as Rosie pointed out, Gemini and Perplexity have sources, and you just click on that and go to the page and see what it says and see what it's telling you. And the more information, the better, because if you find your top, as far as you can tell, 4 or 5 competitors, and they all have very clear pricing that says the minimum fee is $1,000 and it runs from 1,500 to 4 grand a month, and here's the page and here's the info, and you look at all of them and go, actually, none of them seem to include this, or they all have those 3 levels and it looks really bland, or something that gives you an indication. Or again, you can just ask, I've looked at all these pricing things, here's the top 3 I pulled out. Is there anything you see where we could stand out, where what could we explain, what kind of questions might they have about pricing that would help us to stand out and to share things that people are actually wondering? Because oddly enough, in this, AI tech computer led world that we're in now, everybody is looking for a little more humanity, a little more reality, a little more get to the point quickly, which is funny because every AI tool I see is like, do you want me to summarize it? Do you want me to summarize it? And I'm like, no, just give me the information and I will either summarize it myself or I'll use a different tool for it. But you don't need to constantly be summarizing it. So gathering that info and using the different tools to ask questions about what else does it have? What is it missing? Why might this not be a good industry? Why might this competitor be better than us? Don't be afraid to ask those questions. It's just an AI tool. You're not condemning your own business. That they might portray themselves as better, and you might be saying, yeah, but I know that we're better because we do this. But is that on your website? Is that in your marketing? Do you have all that? I have totally lost track of the number of calls I've had with accountants where after about 20 minutes, I'm like, you have a fantastic firm, and that is not shown on your website. Everything that you just told me in 20 minutes is phenomenal and amazing, and you're personable and human, and you'd shared this, and I even learned something. And your website is the world's most standard, boring accounting website. It happens all the time. So, anything in this world of AI and research and data and people doing all of this, be as human as you can in your marketing so that you stand out. And then just combine that with the actual real information that people are looking for. Does that, for those of you who are looking at pricing, does that answer your question, or do you have more questions about pricing? And I do want to ask while you're thinking about that or typing it in, Adam, I just wanted to ask if you had any other thoughts because I hadn't done some testers on pricing, but I was curious if you had thoughts on how could make sure to get the best information about competitor pricing.
It's not absolutely foolproof, but I have used it to ask for particular pages and then to review particular
Mm,
pages. So because it's so web connected, you can
hmm
sort of have a prompt around like look for specific pricing pages and evaluate X, Y, and Z, or just
hmm
do these competitor websites have a prominent pricing page and see what it
hmm
surfaces? Because it will be able
hmm
to surface anything that, in general, the web search crawlers, LLMs can find, and just give you that sort of top level evaluation of how that competitive set then are positioning their pricing,
hmm
and you can use that to evaluate, yeah, how detailed your pricing page wants to be, or if anyone's doing anything particularly innovative or not in that space. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask it for quite specific things. It may
hmm
not.
good point.
always work depending on the access it has to the data.
Mhm.
But I'll always try and sort of ask for, yeah, how visible is this pricing, or how well positioned is it, or is there anything interesting about pricing approaches to this market?
Mhm.
And it can be quite good.
Yeah. Also I was just thinking while you were saying that things like packages, pages about their packages or their levels or their three-tier, because almost every accountancy firm has that, even
Yeah,
if they don't have pricing, and that could give you an indicator of what they say their packages are.
absolutely, absolutely.
And that would be levels of research. Again, you're like, is this industry a good idea? What are my competitors doing with this industry? What is the pricing that they do have? What are the packages and what is included at that? Gina was asking, is value pricing still the thing we're doing? You could ask that question specifically, like start with the audience and find those competitors and then say, do they mention value pricing? Or pick out some of those terms. And this is where we could start to get, if I go back to this one, we could start to get into detail like Uber Suggest and Google Trends and things looking for specific words. But again, you can ask the tools to say, is value pricing still coming up as something? Do they have blogs on it? Do they have content on it? Does that phrase get used on this website? Again, this is where AI really shines. But the more specific your questions, then the more it can search that. And sometimes it'll come back and say, I don't see anything about that. But then you say, well, okay, can you find a page on their website about their packages? And then you look at it and go, well, I think they do value pricing. So asking as many questions that you can and getting as much information as you can is a good start. I also saw the question about, you know, are we softening prices with the economy the way it is? I will say the short version that I've experienced with the firms we're working with is actually, and again, in this very AI computer led world that we have, people are absolutely valuing the human expert viewpoint and approach and support with it. So, for those who do have proven experience, so we have worked with vets for 10 years, we have case studies, we have stories. That's another one that you can ask the AI tools. Do these firms have case studies? Do they have testimonials? Do they have quotes? Do they have Google reviews? You could ask it to do some research on Google reviews, even, or Google My Business. That's another area we recommend all of you set up your Google business profile. Check what theirs are. If they've got 47 reviews, all of which are 5-star in the last 2 years, that does tell you something. And if they've got two reviews that are one 3-star and one 4-star from 10 years ago, that tells you something. And if that's your firm, you've got some work to do too. But I would say that the firms who have the expertise are actually often increasing their prices to reflect the human expertise that they have and how they bring that in there. And they're saying, we don't just churn your stuff through AI and give it to you. We help you, we support you, we meet with you as often as we need. We focus in this area, and that is why we charge what we charge. And that's the point with pricing, is for your pricing to be connected to the value that they receive. And the biggest question the buyer is asking is not only how much does it cost, but what do I get for that? How is it different from what I was getting? And is it going to deliver what I want it to deliver? And I've seen loads of conversations of people saying, how much do you charge? And the accountant says, oh, well, it starts at 700 a month. And they're like, what? My previous accountant was 200 a month or 1,000 a year. And they're like, okay. And you just told me you're not able to get a hold of them and they haven't done your tax return for the last 2 years. So you want to keep paying that and getting that that result? Or do you want to actually get this, like, just reminding people you've got to connect the money to what you get from it. Let me know if that's helpful, or if there's anything else you guys want to ask about in terms of pricing. But that's the approach that I would take. Good. Okay. I did also want to mention just on the assets thing, this is there's a service that we have called the gap analysis. Some of you have been through it or are going through it, which is where we identify what your gaps are as an accountancy firm in your marketing. And one of those areas is what is the gap in your assets? Like, do you have assets? Do you have PDF guides or YouTube videos or website pages or resources? Or do you have none? But what is your gap? So I just want to give you just a little, I know this is a ton of information, but this is the level of research that we do on your firm, and we also compare it to your competitors, and we do all this client and competitor research to ask the questions of, do your core pages exist? Do they reflect who you actually are? Is there a clear way for visitors to convert? Do you have testimonials? What about your messaging? So we ask all these questions and then we evaluate it and say, you've got a gap here. This one's good. That one's not so good. You could improve that. It's just a tiny part of what we do, but these are the kinds of questions you can ask AI. You can say, do I have these main core pages? Does it look like I have any assets for this audience? Is the language of my website, does it seem to fit with the language that veterinarians use or whatever the industry is? And just ask it those questions because I think in the past we've all been a little hesitant to hear somebody say we're not doing such a good job because we've all got imposter syndrome and think we're doing a rubbish job in general when we're probably not. But if you're asking GPT or one of the AI tools, what kinds of things are keynote speakers searching for? What words are they using? What do their websites look like? Does mine seem to align with that? And that way you're inquiring and researching about the potential industry, you're inquiring about the potential competitors and the pricing, and then you're also inquiring about your own site and your own marketing and finding those gaps. So you can have us do it or you can do a little DIY work, but that is a really important thing to discover is what your gaps are. And if you do want to talk to us about what a gap analysis looks like, just type in gap analysis in the chat and we'll send you some info on it. The other thing I want to make sure we cover in this masterclass today is not just asking the AI tools, but asking the humans. So I'm presuming almost all of us use AI note takers. So drop into the chat box which one you use. So PF Team uses Fathom pretty regularly. I know people use Otter and Vinyl, and I don't even know anymore. The Fireflies, Tinkerbell, there's like a billion different ones. Couple Fireflies, couple Otters, Super Normal, of course. Interesting, Gina, about vinyl. Um, and Andrew, I presume you're, yeah, asking which one's the best. I mean, my experience with note takers is very similar to CRMs. Pick the one that's easiest for you to use and use it regularly. There is no note taker that is the most perfect one ever. I really like Fathom, but there are some things that I'm like, oh my gosh, this drives me mental. But my single favorite feature of Fathom is when you go in there and you look at the meeting, there is an Ask Fathom feature that you can literally say, Adam and I had this call with this client. Did we talk about competitor pricing? And Fathom comes back and says, yes, at 36.27, Adam talked about these competitors and the client mentioned these, and we jump straight to it and we can watch it. That is phenomenal. I use it all the time. But whatever note taker you use, the point is, if you use it regularly for sales calls, client calls, in our case, gap analysis calls, marketing calls, whatever, you have this gold dust to ask the note taker, hey, what are my clients asking about? What kind of questions do they have? What questions do my prospects have? So, whatever your note taker, I would upload as many of them as you can, both client and sales calls, but I would do it in two different categories. And so, for example, you could upload all the client calls that you've had when you are redoing their pricing, for example. You're sending them a proposal. and you upload 10 of those and you say, right, I want to know what questions that they asked. What did they ask in what order? It's also a really important question to ask on the sales and prospect side. In what order did they ask those questions? Is there anything they're worried about? Is there anything they're excited about? Do you see any sales opportunities? What you're doing is using the AI note taker to say, do you see patterns that I might be missing? Because we bring our own mental expectations to client calls, especially, but also sales calls. And we come away and we go, oh, they asked about pricing again. But if you're putting all your sales calls in there and you're saying in what order, and 9 times out of 10, the very last question they asked was about pricing, that's actually a good sign. That means they asked all their questions about value and fit and, do you share the same kind of personal values? And then they asked about pricing. Now, again, if the AI tool is like, actually, after they asked about pricing, 7 of the 10 hesitated and used words like, well, I need to think about it and I'm not sure, and that's actually a lot, or whatever it be. And that tells you a little bit more about what you can be doing in your marketing, which is things like getting ahead of the game. So if your prospects are all asking, who do I work with? What's the onboarding like? What do I have to tell my previous accountant and how much does it cost? Those better be the top 4 FAQs on your pricing page or your how we work page or and your website, because that's what everybody wants to know. And then before the call, you can send them that page and say, you might be wondering one of these 4 questions. And they're going, I was actually wondering all of those questions. How did you know? Because you gathered this data. So the research you're doing is on your existing clients. And I will also add for client calls, only upload the calls of clients you want more of. Because if you're uploading all of these calls for clients you really don't like and don't want more of, and it's like, these are the questions they're asking, you're like, well, I guess I better put that in my marketing. Guess who you're going to attract? The ones that you didn't want more of. Same thing with sales calls, although I would, take that one again with a grain of salt because you want to say, is there a reason they might hesitate or not show interest or delay? And what could we give them? But you combine this with the research that you've done on the industry, the competitors, the pricing, and ask those questions and then combine all again, you can pile all of that into GPT or Claude or Gemini and say, here's all the research that we've done together. Here's the client calls. Here's the sales calls. Can you find the patterns here in the top, 3 questions that everybody is asking? And that can give you a really good direction for the marketing content or assets that you need to create. And just please remember the human side with all of this AI lessons and research and talk and work. Don't forget to end every single client meeting with, is there anything else that you wanted to ask us that you haven't had a chance to? One of my favorites is there anything else, no matter how small, that you wanted to mention? Because 9 times out of 10, they go, no, everything. Well, actually, and then they tell you the thing that they didn't want to ask because it seems so small, but it's just a little light to you, like, oh, that is interesting because 3 of my clients asked that, which means that might be something we need to address. And you're giving them the freedom to just say, listen, this isn't a big deal, just, you know, anything that you thought of. And then once they tell you and you answer it, then you say, is there anything else? Is there anything else? And you ask that until they stop saying that there's anything else. You can do this by a quick text or a message. Just be like, hey, I'm doing some research on these kind of clients and I was curious about this. Just wondering your perspective. People love to give their perspective. So don't forget to actually ask them like humans because you combine that with your great AI research on clients and competitors and pricing and your Fathom note takers or your AI note takers. And then you just ask a human, hey, I was wondering this, what do you think? And then just combine all of that to put that together. Couple other practical prompts I find helpful when you're doing research with the AI tools. Tell it not to reword the way things people say things in calls. This is especially true for client calls and sales calls. AI tools are notorious for summarizing, simplifying, genericizing everything. I constantly am like, do not reword this. I want the word for word quote of what my client said. You can take out the ums and ahs, but that's about it. Um, Tell it to ask you questions. Ask me questions about why I'm researching this. Ask me questions about why I'm interested in this industry. Ask me questions about my firm compared to this competitor. Ask me questions about my pricing. You will get some great questions when you do this, but it's your job to direct it. Another great one is I have put this potential thing together. Can you review this as a very cautious and skeptical prospect? Somebody who's had a bad experience with other accountants and is worried they're going to waste their money. What might they be worried about? What do you see clients in this industry? What do you see those in wellness centers? What kind of bad experiences have they had? Maybe it'll bring up a bunch of Google reviews that are negative of wellness centers who have had accountants or something. So the more specific questions you can ask as you're doing that research, and the more we can lean towards what if the answer is no? What if this is bad? What if this is not a good idea? What if this doesn't work? I send out a personal creative headspace email every Saturday, and it's content that doesn't go anywhere else, just in the email. And the one I was doing last week was on this concept of failure. And maybe some of you have heard this before, of this, like, what would you do if you knew that you could not fail? And I'm like, well, that's a stupid question, because we are going to fail. Failure is part of creativity. It's just normal. We're human. If you knew that you wouldn't fail, nothing would be hard. Everything would just flow. And I get the motivation concept, but my point is, I feel like GPT and a lot of the AI tools are crafted to be like, you will not fail. That is the single best industry you could ever consider. So it is your job to help it help you to just question. You don't have to be the world's most suspicious person, but professional skepticism, it's a quality that accountants have, and it's a good one. So use that in your researching to help you find that information. So, given all of that, and we have about 1 minute, if this was helpful to you, you got some ideas, you got some things that you're going to put together, we would love to have you join the AI Marketing Accelerator. It is a 8-week coaching group. There's a kickoff session next week, and then we start properly in February. And as I said, we have 6 spaces left, and it's just a focused time for you to come once a week, hour and 15 minutes, group of people like this, a lot more interaction even. I know we've had questions in the chat, but we unmute people say, hey, I was thinking about this, and we dig into it, and we do a lot of stuff live, and we're looking at all these areas, which happen to be the areas of the accountant marketer, and how you can use AI to help you with them. So if you want to join that, Adam, if you could drop the accelerator link, it's just wearepf.com/accelerator. And I'm going to skip that because we're going to come back to it. If you use the code countdown20, you get 20% off if you do that before next week. And other than that, next session is in February on tracking your marketing data, which is where we're going to look at heat mapping and Google My Business and Google Analytics and all of these cool things about what is happening on your website and how you can see progress, and of course how it compares to other competitors and other accountants, so that you can get what you need. But would love to have you on the Accelerator coaching group. If you have any questions about it, you know where I am: LinkedIn, team at email, website, etc. If you're ready to go, Adam's dropped the link there. Use countdown20 and you're good to go. If you've heard of another code and you're wondering what it is, just drop us a note and we'll send that to you. And thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in February. Have a great day. Bye.